Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of A Healthy Dose of Fran. Today, the Avatar returns in a hotly debated topic that comes from the Legend of Korra, pertaining to Aang, and in particular, his parenting ability. Now, I'll get into that a little bit more after this, because really the debate that came from it was that it appeared that Aang himself was not a perfect parent, and lots of people didn't like this idea. But really, I think Aang as a parent makes sense. Now, for anyone who hasn't seen Legend of Korra, Aang and Katara had 3 children: Bumi, Kaya and Tenzin. Bumi was a non-bender child, Kaya was a waterbender, and Tenzin was an airbender and went on to have airbending children. But the idea of Aang's parenting comes into discussion in Book 2 when the 3 siblings are in search of Jinora and they are often arguing with each other, and the question of Aang's parenting comes up within this sequence because, according to Tenzin, Aang was a perfect father. He was kind, loving, even though he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. But from Kaya and Bumi's perspective, Aang almost neglected them because Tenzin was his airbending son. He was the person who was going to carry on the lost culture of the air nomads. And intentional or not, he put his focus and love and attention onto Tenzin, often forgetting about Kaya and Bumi. Now, a lot of people really did not like this fact because from knowing Aang from the original series, we had a sort of perfectionist idea about Aang. We didn't like this thought that he could do something wrong, even though he had shown the possibility of doing things incorrectly, both in the show and the graphic novels. But still, this debate continued, predominantly because they just didn't like the idea that he was not the best parent. But what I'll be debating today is why it kind of does actually make sense. So let's get on to this reasoning. So the main reasoning for why Aang not being the best parent to Kaya and Bumi makes sense because, like we know from the series that he was in, he was the last airbender. He was the only being in the entire world who could airbend and could hold on to his people's culture that was basically gone and couldn't be passed on to anyone because quite a lot of their culture was tied into their bending. Yes, they had the air nomad nation come back, but none of them were benders, so he couldn't pass the majority of his culture onto them. And we see this in a few cases as well in the graphic novels known as The Promise, where he meets a air nomad society of girls who aren't really following the way in which the air nomads used to be, but are trying their best. But again, they're still not air benders, so he can't pass all of his knowledge and his culture onto them, and this continues on until Tenzin is born and shown to be an airbender, the first new airbender in over 100+ years. Now just imagine Aang. He's lost his entire culture, his entire race and family and his bending culture. And all of this loss and grief most likely clouds his judgment the moment Tenzin is born and shows that he is a bender, but particularly an air bender, the thing that Aang has wanted to see in the world more than anything, because now he has someone he can pass his bending culture onto, because there is a chance that in future there could be more airbenders from Tenzin's family. So it makes sense that, and yes, it's not right that this happens, but it makes sense that Aang would put a lot more of his attention towards Tenzin because his grief is guiding him to do this. And we've seen his grief take control in more cases than it hasn't. Like when Appa was kidnapped in the series, Aang let the Avatar state take over in his emotions because he was feeling this grief of losing something that was tied to his culture. Because Appa, being an air bison, is part of the air nomad culture. And we can see this with Tenzin, this focusing on Tenzin and raising him in the culture and going on such things as air nomad pilgrimages. But just with Tenzin is just Aang realising that there's a way to bring back his culture through his son. He just managed to forget his 2 other children in the process. So when looking back at Legend of Korra and learning that Aang may not have been the most perfect parent or person that we thought he could be, while it is a hard pill to swallow, when we look at it from the fact that he used to be the last airbender until his son Tenzin was born, it makes sense that this grief that he felt over losing his culture would come back and take its place in wanting to focus on this new airbender and give him this culture that Aang can finally pass on. The only negative of it is that he forgot about his 2 other children, Kaya and Bumi. And yes, it sucks, but it does make sense. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with me that Aang as a parent makes sense in the fact that he prioritised Tenzin over Kaya and Bumi in a way? Or do you think it didn't actually make sense? Either way, let me know in the comment section down below. But in general guys, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you go to the description box down below, you'll find the links to my Instagram and Patreon. Where on Patreon you get early access to any and all of my videos, as well as other sayings that comes out in future. Here on YouTube, however, if you guys aren't already subscribed, go to the button down below or click the one popping up here on screen. If you want to check out any of my previous Avatar videos, the playlist will be popping up here, and then something else for you lovely folks will be popping up here. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.